family EV segment continues to grow, and we have two brand new offerings from two very familiar household names. I have the new Opel Grandland.
And I've got the Nissan Ariya. Now granted, this one has been to the Nismo department and has a few more bells and whistles, but we'll talk about that a bit more later on. And as a whole, in this video, we're going to compare the Grandland versus the Ariya. This is the Done Deal Cars YouTube channel. Now let's get testing some cars. All right, Paddy, give us a little bit of an insight into the Grandland.
Yeah, well look, the Grandland was kind of a bit boring before. It's become a little bit more interesting with this new latest version. Certainly at the front end, the styling is really impressive. I really like this illuminated emblem and the huge amount of LEDs that they've put into the front of this car. So this car looks really good, especially at night time. Styling wise, look, it's not dramatic. Certainly in terms of the Stellantis group, you have Peugeot 5008 within the same group, which looks a lot more dramatic, but it is quite a nice looking car. It's a very substantial looking car. This is the GS spec, so it has these 19-inch diamond cut wheels, which look pretty smart to me. And overall, it's a big bus. You have plenty of space, and we'll look at the space inside later. Interestingly enough, when it comes to charging, it does have what it says is up to 160 kilowatt fast charging. However, when you look into the actual numbers, that's at a very limited point. Certainly when you start charging it, if it's really empty, you're going to get that speed. It's going to average out about 90 kilowatts over the 10 to 80%.
And what about prices?
So this car starts at under 40 grand, which is really impressive. Interestingly enough, it's the cheapest version of the Grandland you can get. So the EV is actually cheaper starting off than the petrol version, the petrol hybrid version. This one here, as it sits here, is €43,760, and this is the sort of up bells and whistles GS spec. So there's quite a small price walk between the entry point to the very top spec model we have here.
Which is not the case with my Ariya, so let's go check that out.
So Dave, while my car looks very sensible and very staid, yours looks like it's crashed into a branch of Halfords. What's happened here?
It looks like a 17-year-old ran free, that's for sure. We'll talk about that later. The Ariya as a whole, this one obviously has the body kit. It looks a little bit more sporty. However, what I will say is generally these cars are a little bit more sophisticated. Yeah. I actually think they look sometimes a little bit top heavy. I don't know if that's my interpretation, but generally it is quite a nice car to look at. I think the styling is really, really good. I remember when the original concept came out, I was a big fan. And I suppose similarly priced to the Grandland, they start at just under 40,000 euros. Actually very, very marginal difference. However, here we've got two battery options, which we'll talk about later. And so to get, I suppose, an equivalent battery size to the Grandland in terms of range, you're talking about 53,000 euros. Wow. So it is a good bit more. And then really to kind of go the whole way and spec one of these, you're going to need in the mid 50s. This one, closer to 70. A lot of money.
So we're talking about 25 grand difference between these two cars, yeah, which is the price of a Renault 5.
Yes, however, I wouldn't recommend that you go for the Nismo edition. Now, one thing that you touched on was charging speeds, and pretty much every electric car nowadays goes from 20 to 80% in about half an hour. That's pretty stock standard, but this has 22 kilowatt hour AC charging, or 22 kilowatt AC charging.
So what does that mean for people?
That means the small little ESP chargers that you see on the side of the street, you can actually charge quite quickly off one of those, whereas most EVs you can't. They only take about 7.
Yeah, that's something you see in Renault models as well. So that is a really useful feature.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go talk about batteries.
Comes to electric cars, of course, you're going to want to know about batteries and range. And the Grandland is pretty impressive in that regard. Under here is a 77 kilowatt hour battery, 73 of that is usable. But the range is really impressive. It has a WLTP range of 520 kilometers. Now look, you're never going to get that, but even if you're regularly getting in and around 400 kilometers, that's really impressive.
So battery size, a little bit more complicated in the Ariya, but not overly so. There is a 63 kilowatt hour battery, and that has a range of about 400 kilometers WLTP, which means real world 340, maybe 350. However, there is an 87 kilowatt hour battery, and that's actually the one I'd recommend going for. You get 524 kilometers range, which real world is maybe 470, 480, and that is more than enough for the Irish road, and definitely with the Irish network improving week by week. So generally speaking, I'd say go for the bigger battery. However, you are going to have to pay for it And then all of a sudden, the Grandland becomes a bit more of an affordable option.
So in terms of the boot space on the Grandland, it's a little bit more generous than Dave's. 550 litres back here, which is pretty good for a car of this size. However, there is nowhere to put the charging cables officially. Now you could take them out of this case here and shove them in underneath where the spare wheel is. And a spare wheel is actually something you don't often see on cars of this type nowadays. One thing I'm a bit disappointed of is there's no electric tailgate. However, the tailgate is quite light, but I would have expected this to be as standard in the top spec model.
In terms of boot space in the Ariya, it is a little bit smaller, quite a lot, 466 litres, and that's largely down to this sloping rear roof line. It does just make it smaller. I actually think getting a dog in here would reduce dog headspace. I know that's a very specific thing, but it's something I'd bear in mind. There is a little bit of storage in here, which is quite nice, and there's no load lip. And generally it's actually quite an open space, and you can remove this low cover if you need. The tailgate being electric also helps, but again, that is all dependent on what specification you go for. So to drive the Ariya, one thing I have to give credit to is, whilst it is an SUV, it's quite narrow, which means on Irish roads, it's actually very easy to live with. That's something I really do like. Now, as an EV in general, the ordinary Ariya, which I have driven, it's a great car to drive. Generally, it's got, depending on which spec, about 300 horsepower, which is tons. It's very quick, it's very responsive. You've got Apple CarPlay. It's just a dream to live with. However, this is the Nismo. And I don't really talk about this, but I am a massive Japanese car fan. I've had everything from Civic Type Rs to some of the more hardcore stuff. And I have to say, putting a Nismo badge on a family SUV doesn't sit great with me. I think it looks better than the ordinary Ariya, but I just wish they called it something else, because traditionally Nismo meant stuff was really, really crazy. And this is quick. It's over 430 horsepower. It picks up fast. However, if you want a fast family SUV that's electric, you're better off going for like a Tesla Model Y Performance or something like that. It's gonna handle better, it's gonna be more responsive, and it's also gonna be quicker. However, it is good and lively, but back to the real world, it actually is a nice size. It fits in and out of car parking spots. It's got all your general ADAS that you quite like in terms of regenerative braking, and obviously then your accident emergency, adaptive cruise control, lane assist. It all works really, really well. Personally, I turn it all off, but it's completely up to you.
So in terms of the drive of the Grandland, there's nothing particularly interesting about how it drives. It's incredibly comfortable though, and I can't stress how good these seats are. So this is exactly the type of car you need if you spend a lot of time driving across the country like I do. And the fact that it has really impressive range too is going to be an added bonus for any EV buyer, because the return on this battery is really impressive. This is probably a 400 kilometer car on a full charge without trying too hard, and that's really impressive these days. In terms of the infotainment system, it works really well. Obviously, like all of us, we use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto predominantly, and in this car it works pretty seamlessly. What I do like as well is that wireless charging pad, the Pixel box, which does keep you away from your phone, and I know we're all guilty of being drawn towards our phone these days. So once you put that into the box, you can see that it's charging, and you pull the drawer over and you don't go near it again. But overall, in terms of this Grandland, it does what an EV should. It has decent range, it's very, very comfortable, charges very fast, and has plenty of space. And for that, that's going to really suit most EV buyers perfectly.
inside of the Ariya, in my opinion, it's actually a little bit of a nicer place to be. It feels a bit more modern. Everything you touch and feel feels a little bit more premium. Now granted, this is the Nismo, but even in general, they are a very lovely place to sit. I love the steering wheel. One of the big reasons for it is because you can rest your hand down here on a long drive. I know you shouldn't, however, in the real world, this is a functional feature. There's also wireless charging in there, some drink holders here. The shift knob is nice and easy to use. The screen here, it all works really well. Realistically, you'll spend your life in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and again, that integrates just like it does in any other car. There's also another screen here in front of you. They kind of roll into each other. Again, that's actually very intuitive, very easy to use. You tend to not really go through it once you've set it up for the first time. So maybe that's something that your dealership could help you with. So if you'd like to find out where your nearest Nissan dealership is, you can hit the link up there. But as a whole, it's a really nice place to be. I'll say the seat is not as comfortable as it is in the Opel. But other than that, I have to say, it's a great interior.
So in terms of the interior of the Grandland, it's pretty impressive in here. A mixture of quality, however. Some of the plastics do feel quite nice to the touch. Some of them are a little bit scratchy, but in some areas I've noticed that they're just quite brittle. This is definitely going to break, and that's quite disappointing. A couple of features that I do really like. This Pixel box. This is a wireless charging unit, so you put that in, pull back this cover, and it means you're not tempted to mess with your phone. So that works really well. The other thing I really like are these seats. They're probably one of the best seats I've come across in any car of late. Really, really comfortable. And this strip down the middle of the seats here serves a purpose, gives your tailbone a little bit of a rest. So on longer journeys, you get a really, really comfortable ride. The great thing about the majority of the upholstery in this car is that it's made from recycled material. Now, the other thing as well about these seats is there's a million different ways to adjust the lumbar. So certainly for people who have issues with their back, they're going to really appreciate this car.
So after spending, I suppose, a couple of days in each car, Paddy, what's your overall opinion?
Do you know what? I'm really pleasantly surprised by this Grandland. I had no real opinion of it going into it, and when I looked at it, I thought, okay, it's going to be reasonably bland, but it does what it should do very well in terms of being a good, generously sized family car, big boot. I cannot stress, and it's a small thing, how good the seats are in this car. And for me, who spends such a long time in a car going from Dublin to Cork a lot, that was a real bonus in this car. So really, really strong points for that. Some of the quality of the materials, as I showed inside, just really aren't great. I would have loved to have seen an electric tailgate as standard in this GS model, but overall, I've been really pleasantly surprised with this thing. What about you in this?
Well, personally, I actually have to say, I do quite like the Ariya. I know a couple of people who've bought them and they're very pleased with them as a whole. I suppose the Nismo kit's probably a bit excessive. I wouldn't buy it. It is good to drive. It's better than it should be, considering it is a little bit top heavy at times. As a whole, I think it's a great car. The range is decent if you go for the other one. The only problem with it is I think it's a bit expensive. I think that's where Nissan are dropping the ball at the moment a little bit. I hope that will change now with the new Micra and the new Leaf as they come in. But as a whole, I have enjoyed it. I suppose the big question is, which would you buy? And personally, there's such a selection out there in this segment that I don't know. You could go Skoda, you could go Kia. There's so many options.
And I think that's the important point here, because both of these cars are in and around the 40,000 euro mark starting off. And in the case of the Grandland electric is actually cheaper than the petrol version. So we can see that that choice of EV is growing. And for me, I wouldn't have considered this car, but it would be right up there now on my list of cars to consider. Probably in the segment though, still Skoda Elroq for me.
Yeah, Skoda Elroq is good. Anyway, let us know in the comments what car you would go for. And that is it for now from Done Deal Cars. We'll see you in the next one.